thank you so much for having me. Big thank you to Michael and Kenneth for inviting me to speak. When Kenneth asked me to speak about why MailChimp loves the web, I said, yeah, sure, we can do that. We absolutely love the web. And then I started really thinking it through and was like, wow, I'm going to have to settle in on some themes here. So the themes that I'm going to be talking about are very much following the theme of software is not just about code, because I'm not going to really be digging into super hardcore code. I'm going to be talking about users. And the main theme thread to all of this is we love the web because that's where users are. That's where all of you who just raised your hands have used email. Maybe someone who said they actually liked writing HTML email. Talk to me later, please, because you're crazy. So it's because our users are there. So first, just to tee everything up, I want to talk about MailChimp's company motto, and it's listen hard, change fast. Our core values are humility, creativity, and independence. And we believe that those values really lead us to be a company that can listen hard and change fast. That said, there's no way we could do that without the web. For those of you who might be somewhat as old as I am, who maybe used to ship software on diskettes, that was my first job in software actually, was burning software onto diskettes and then using this like horrible glue that would get you super high if you got anywhere near it to put labels on it and ship it out to customers. The feedback loop was just absolutely impossible. There was no chance you were going to get any reasonable information from your users. And if you did, turning it around took absolutely forever. You had to have the crazy little intern go play with his glue and build new diskettes, ship it out to customers. They had to install it. Then they had to start using it again and then talk to your sales team, and the vicious cycle kept going. I know we're all taking this for granted today, but I had to share that story because the feedback loop on the web is absolutely unbelievable. So when it comes to listen hard, change fast, there's kind of two parts there. The first part is listening hard. If you're building a web product, you have got to build tools to listen hard to your customers. That's both analytics, say Google Analytics. It's things like full story, watching your users use your app and seeing where they're running into problems and having rage clicks and doing all these things. But it's also listening to the internet at large. Right? I know sometimes going to Twitter and searching for your own product can be horrible because we all know there are shitstorms. But sometimes it also leads to really great things. So my first story is about that happening. A few years ago, we saw this tweet. I saw this tweet because I was searching for people talking about MailChimp. It's disappointed MailChimp's icon for scheduled campaigns did not reflect the send time. I saw that and said, that's actually a fairly good note. What he's talking about here is this clock. If you set a campaign and you were going to schedule it to run later, that clock looked like that, and it was always 1 o'clock. It was just the icon. That's what the icon team built. It was how it was set up. So I saw this suggestion and said, that's pretty awesome. It's pretty sweet. So I did what every annoying VP does. Said to the front-end devs, hey, did you see this really cool suggestion? Y'all should do that. So the first response comes from the lead UX engineer, who's basically speaking on behalf of his team, saying, that is a great suggestion. How about you use snapsvg.io? What do you think of that? So the email thread gets to our front-end engineer, Mardov, who has this response. Absolutely loves this picture of Mardov. He is amazing. He's super, super great at his job. He gets this email and he says, you know what? That actually is a fairly good idea. Let me dig into it. Of course, he says, pretty quickly, got a working demo. Thanks for the snap SVG suggestion, but you're a little crazy. I'm going to use D3 instead, more soon. So in about 48 hours, this happens. Annoying VP sends an email. Lead UX guy says, hey, you should probably use this tool. Front-end engineer who's actually doing the work says, listen, I got this, y'all. Implements it, launches it to the web, and now if campaigns are scheduled for 1:45, the clock accurately reflects that. And that's across everything that we're doing. Go, Mardov. I'll make sure I find him and tell him that everyone applauded for that because he did an amazing job there. So the next story here, before I tee this one up, I want to talk about listening hard and comparing quantitative data with qualitative data. So qualitative data is reflected in the name. It's where you emphasize quality over quantity in your data. Quantitative is all about just grabbing the numbers, looking at the numbers, and interpolating what those numbers mean. Now, there's times where if you're focused on just one or the other and not both together, you can run into some pretty serious problems. I myself, being an engineer, have a tendency toward quantitative data. And I have run into problems before. So this story is about the plain text apocalypse. I'm from America, so everything's an apocalypse there. Yeah, I won't go into the horrible political climate. But so, plain text apocalypse. To tee this up, I need to make sure I talk about what the problem we were trying to solve was. So, as I said earlier, we were listening hard. We were noticing that our funnel, going through our campaign wizard, where you set things up, you pick your list, you pick your template, you design it, and you send it, users were dropping off at about a 25% rate between selecting their template and getting to the final spot where they would send their campaign. So we started digging into that heavily, and we really stumbled upon people stopping at about the plain text stage. And that didn't really tell us if plain text was exactly the problem, but we thought maybe it would be. So backing up just a bit, I know a whole bunch of people in the room raised their hands when we asked who's written HTML emails. But I want to talk about this. When you deliver an email, it's a multi-part internet mail exchange format, which means that there's an HTML part and there's a plain text part. This is pretty antiquated. The plain text is there because of history, back when there were clients that couldn't read HTML. So think really old Blackberries or Pine, if any of you remember that amazing editor. And the HTML part, you know, I gotta say, I think because everybody dropped their hands, you all know that calling HTML emails HTML is a bit of a disservice to HTML. So anyway, I've diverged into complaining about HTML emails. I'll continue from there. So what we really thought was, how often are users actually editing the plain text version of these emails? We automatically generate it using some pretty crazy funky code in the back end, stripping out all the HTML and everything and just grabbing text. And so if users aren't actually editing it, maybe we shouldn't even give them the option to edit, and we should just do it automatically. Take a whole step out of the process, work on that funnel, getting users back through the process, and sending their emails. So we went and looked, and we found about 1% of people actually change the plain text version from what the HTML would generate automatically using our backend. At the time, we had about 3.5 million users, so 1% was about 35,000. I think I did that math right. And we said, you know, 35,000, we can probably retrain them. We could also go and look at what they're doing, what they're changing, and see if we can just make our conversion from HTML to plain text better. So we did that. We launched. We fully removed the opportunity to adjust plain text. Can anyone guess what went wrong with that? First off, not meh, because accessibility is a major, major need for a lot of our customers. Of those 35,000, a lot of them were nonprofits or government agencies where not only do they feel a responsibility to providing great plain text email, which is read by screen readers, but they have a requirement to. So in America, there's like 503C and other compliances that they have to adhere to. So what we did was made it actually impossible for them to do their job using our product, all because we used quantitative research instead of qualitative, mixing in qualitative research. Had we said, it's only 35,000, let's talk to 500 of them and see what they say, we probably would have found that out before Twitter did. And we listened hard to them saying, what the hell, we can't do our job anymore. We did land on a great solution. We just wait till the very end of the process, so we still have one fewer step. And at the end of the process, we let our users know exactly why and exactly how they can edit it. They hit edit, they can go and change it. They can say regenerate from the original HTML so they don't get into this horrible case where they've changed one, changed the other, and things are out of sync and going haywire. So it really did turn out well. But for about 48 hours there, it was an absolute disaster. And again, that's the great thing about the feedback loop of the web. It was only a few days. Now for those 35,000 folks, totally sorry about those couple days. In the end, the emails went out, everything was great. So the cautionary tale there is ask why. Use qualitative data, qualitative research. If you have a research team, if you don't, go and find a UX folk, a designer, do it yourself. Find a user. They'd love to engage with you on Twitter, I promise. Get some qualitative data as to what's going on. Okay. All right, so the next theme, another reason that we really love the web is that the web is global. As we heard yesterday, the web is really starting to cover the globe. It hasn't hit everyone. There's a bunch of users in India still coming online and other countries. But for the most part, the web really does span a good part of the globe. In fact, kind of surprising, 56% of MailChimp's customer base is not in the United States. So because of that, we really have a great global connection with our product. Now, how about internationalization? That's the first thing that's going to come up when you start saying you're global. Are you internationalized? By that, everyone almost always means, has your app been translated into the native language of the people using it? And so, the answer is unfortunately no. And that means that the way we probably present ourselves then as viewing the globe and being internationalized kind of fits with the rest of America, something like that. It's not actually the case. We would love to translate our app. But my cautionary tale here to front-end engineers and working with back-end engineers and an entire team is that we built our app without internationalization in mind, and now we're pretty big. And going in and ripping out all the pieces of text that are coming from the back end, coming from the database of all places, coming from the front end is an absolute disaster. So as much as I don't believe in really being abstract and using data abstractions and all of that and over-architecting your application, if you can, think carefully about internationalization before you start to launch. So what we're doing as maybe a second step is we're trying to empower our customers to speak to their customers the way that they would naturally. So for example, we translate all of our messages to our users' recipients. So in our case, we have our MailChimp users, and there's about 16 million of those, and they have their users who they talk to through email and other various measures. There's about 3.5 billion of those. So what we want to do is make sure that our users at least can talk to their users in their native language. So if you go to our list settings, you can see that we will auto-translate based on the language in the browser, or we give users the option to translate their own. And I felt pretty good about this morning. I actually did, when I built this slide, know that Danish was a language spoken here. I haven't gone as far as gotten to 49% fluidity in Duolingo, but I'm getting there. I also am probably sure that something up here is not super well translated, and someone's going to find me later and say, nope, that thing over there for indicates required needs to be changed. And if you're seeing that, yeah, do please come and find me. So another really useful thing you can do if you're looking at internationalizing, but maybe you can't fully translate your app, is look into billing users in their local currency. This really makes everything feel super local. Even if you're global, it translates your app specifically to the region that you're working with in your customers. So here, you can see I picked the Danish krone, which I think is how you say it. But be very careful with this too. You need to also make sure that your receipts can be edited based on the region that you're sending them to. Because there's a lot of countries who need it to be called an invoice if it's a business, and some that need it to be called a receipt, and vice versa. So be very careful with that. I can give you the cautionary tale that bit us. So what I'm saying is, unless you're building something that you know is only going to be used in one very, very specific region, think about internationalization. Again, I absolutely hate over-engineering and hate abstractions. And back in my Java days with the impls and impls and everything else that happens in Java, I just can't stand it. But think very carefully about this. I wish I could go back in time and make sure that we did that. So the next thing that we really love about the web is that it creates communities. I've been really geeking out on this lately, and I think that there's this underlying theme that we're at truly an amazing time in humanity right now, specifically when it comes to engineering. You can do so much with so little these days. You can just have a library card, go in, create a product, throw it up on the internet, and it can hit the globe. Right? When have you been able to do that and even do that level of experimentation in engineering? 100 years ago, there was very little in engineering you could do that way. You couldn't just go out to a forest, chop things down, build a store, and then a community sprout up around it. It just doesn't really work that way. But it does in the web. If you think about it, Facebook, Twitter, these are companies that started a business, stuck something up on the web, and huge communities have formed around them. There are tons of businesses that exist solely because those platforms exist. And we think that's amazing. We really think that's just super, super powerful. It's been so helpful for our users, it's been so helpful for our business. So what we mean by that is APIs really can create communities. If you build a great API, communities will flock. You don't even have to have that many users. You just have to have a really open, solid API. And to do that, you need to have documentation. I promise I didn't tee this up with Una's talk earlier today, but the documentation is really what it's all about here. We've gotten into all kinds of silly engineering wars about should it be RPC or REST, and if you make the mistake of saying your API is RESTful, some like crazy RESTful person is going to be like, it's not because this one resource doesn't work quite properly, and rah. You can get into those arguments all day, but really what really matters is your documentation. If you make your documentation great, you will have and form a great community around your API. For example, go look at Stripe. Their API is unbelievable. It is totally world class. I see it and I'm like, I want to write Stripe code because it's just so amazing. So one of the biggest things you have to do to make sure that your documentation is great is not reveal your underlying infrastructure to your users. So where this bit us, and this is usually where I ask someone to lock the doors while I'm doing some sort of technical discussion, where this usually bites us is because PHP is our language. And if you've used PHP and tried to mess with its type system, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So we've had times where we say in our contract, this API call is going to return an array. In the back end, we ask PHP to serialize the object that's returned. If the array is empty, PHP will say, here's a struct, because I'm PHP and I'm crazy. Sometimes it likes to say, you gave me the Boolean false, I'm going to return the number 0, because I'm PHP and I'm crazy. So make sure you address language pains with your API, because if your documentation specifically says this is the contract, and then your backend prohibits you from adhering to that contract, your documentation is the problem. Right? It's not the backend's fault, it's your documentation's fault. So we addressed that with our latest version of our API. It's API version 3, something that we're really proud of for developers. What we did was adhere to a JSON schema and rebuilt our API to be fully RESTful. What that did was allow us to build a front end that we call a playground that just fully discovers all the resources and then gives engineers a way to go into the playground and actually make requests against their live account. You can see this is actually against my live account. I run a thing called Box Score Mania. This is my list ID. This is the response coming back from the request I made. You can see all of these responses. You can see the full request. It's pretty nice. You can see the whole thing. Another really great thing that we've been able to do because of this is let people test failure codes, which is pretty hard to do usually. Usually an API says, if it fails, it's going to return this thing. And then you just have to wait for the day that fails and hope your code works. What we allow users to do is to pass in the request in a header, please fail, and fail in this way. And it will return and make all of the same requests it would return if it failed. If there was a backend error, if your data wasn't in a good state, any of the ways that it could possibly fail, it will actually go ahead and return you that failure. So, best practices there, care about the documentation. It is all about the documentation. So mobile is on the web. We've heard a lot about this over the last 2 days. MailChimp did a responsive redesign in 2013. We are not a progressive web app, but we are responsive. We don't have any offline mode support. You will see the little dinosaur guy. Sorry about that. But we are responsive. So on a phone and a tablet, everything will work. This is kind of showing you what we redesigned. We went from being all blue and super fancy wizardry to being flat, because that was the hotness. And you can see this is designed to run on a tablet. This was a really fun project. The optimistic team, as usual, says, this will take 3 months. Reality said, no, it took twice as long. Is it working? Yeah, okay. So yeah, it took us 6 months. A team of about 12 was all our back-end, front-end, and design team at the time in 2013. We fully 100% rebuilt everything. We touched every page. We touched absolutely everything. When our QA team came to us as we were planning this, they said, so what are we going to need to test? We're like, everything. Being our QA team, because they've worked with us for quite a while, they said, okay, whatever. We will just test like users, not like testers, which really enabled us to get things done. And what they mean by that is they're going to test to see if they can get their jobs done as a user, not to see if they can get their jobs done as a tester. So one of the just trite little examples I use here is I've once worked with a tester who loved to put the Declaration of Independence inside of a text field and then hit submit. And if the page broke, they were like, ha-ha, I got you, I can't ship your thing. MailChimp's testers would say, don't do that, which I think is phenomenal. So they're not testing for, is this button 5 pixels off of where it should have been? Is this list not arranged the way this image you built 4 months ago said it would be? They're testing to see whether it's usable, intuitive, and fits the rest of the system. And that's what our bugs end up looking like. That's the only reason we were able to do this in 6 months. But it was successful. We noticed that the year that was launched, our numbers started really scaling up on how many people were using our product on tablets and phones. It's starting to hit 50%. And in fact, searches for MailChimp and people landing on our site is now over 50% on mobile devices. So not to sit up here and be all braggy about our cool 6-month project that we knew was going to take 6 months. I want to talk about some things that went wrong. So where did it get tough for us? Editing an email on a phone, I say it's hard. It was probably freaking impossible. If you are familiar with our editor at all, it's a heavy JavaScript application. There's lots of drag and drop. There's lots of clicking into things. There's iframes to handle controls. It is intense. And if you've ever tried to do any of that on a mobile device, you know things are going to get rough. So we worked really, really hard at it. We did our best to try to make it work. We use CK Editor. If you've ever worked with that, it's actually really great what it spits out, but it can be an absolute bear to work with. It's not geared for touch. Nothing that we did was geared for touch. So you'd go in, you'd try to touch and click a thing, and the cursor would drag around, screen would scroll, everything would go crazy. It was just horrendous. We tried our best. We launched it. Users said, this is ridiculous. So we actually turned it off. You go to it on your phone, it says, you can't do this. Rather than you're going to have a horrible shit experience, we just say, meh, let's not even try. So what we did instead was we launched a native app on iOS to see how that would go. We had one engineer work on this. He spent about 3 months working on it. It supported offline. It supported everything our editor fully supports. It looked great. It worked great until we made any change on the web, because that product was built just for the web. Like I said, it's basically a JavaScript application. So getting the APIs ported back was just an absolute nightmare. It never really happened in time. The experience totally went divergent. Our users weren't able to get what they needed through this native mobile app. So divergent experiences are bad, really, really bad. Not a whole lot of wisdom there, you know that. So what we decided to do instead was, let's maybe just reimagine this, and let's build a mobile app that's just super simple. You just break it out, snap a picture, hit send, and it's done, right? Sort of like Instagram for email. And it worked. It was great. It was super cute. People could use it, but they couldn't really use it to get their jobs done. That's not how our users work. So again, we didn't really do a great job with our qualitative analysis on this. It won an award, and we were like, woo, that's awesome. And our users were like, yeah, who cares? So what we did was started focusing on really what our users needed. And just a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, we finally launched email editing on a mobile. And what we did was launch a hybrid version. So we have gotten our editor inside a web view in a native app. So this is actually from my phone. But what we've done is added a little bridge. So this is native, and that's native, and that's native. And it just communicates with the underlying code through JavaScript layer underneath. It works pretty well. It's not really how we want it to work. We want it just to be web first, right? But it does work pretty well, and we're able to do it. So when we talk about the future of the web, I know we at MailChimp would certainly love for some of these things to get a lot better and make it easier to build these interfaces. But for now, this is working fairly well. And here's a little funny animation. Not even sure why I put that in there. All right. So the next thing that we really love about the web is that you can really be yourself. And if you look at any of our advertising or how we build things or how our crazy VPs get up on stage and talk, we really view ourselves as kind of crazy little misfits in Atlanta. And we really think that that's worked out super well for us. We do a lot of crazy things with swag. We try to delight users. We try to have a lot of fun. If my bag is ever found, I have a whole gigantic thing full of swag in there that I was hoping to bring and throw out to people. So hopefully I can find that and get y'all some hats and vinyl toys. But we believe that being yourself makes all the difference. And that's what we tell our users, and we hope to inspire them by being ourselves. And I really think that the web is just an amazing platform to be able to do that, because your quirkiness can come through. You can build experiences that are just phenomenal and unparalleled in a quick, short amount of time. This is another thing that I believe old Screaming Mardov the Great did, where empathizing with our users, we know that it's a little bit scary to press that send button. So we got this animation of Freddy, who's our mascot, and his hand getting super, super sweaty as he's about to press the send button. What's really cool about this that I didn't get a great animation of is they went the extra mile, the front end team, and if you hover over the send now button, his hand sweats more. And that's just like such a great little touch, right? That's something that I feel like the web is totally the platform that delivers that type of experience. So similarly, after you've gotten over your sweatiness and you press that send button, Freddy gives you a high five, right? And it's awesome because when we listen hard, people on Twitter say, how many of you high five your laptop when you send an email from MailChimp? And we're just like, that's fucking awesome. And one of the super cool things, so that same team that made his hands sweat a little more profusely when they could tell users were scared, well, also with this, if you press his hand again, so this isn't an animation loop, but he eventually stops. And if you press his hand, he'll high five you again. And if you press it again, he'll high five you again. And the more he high fives you, the more red his hand gets. And eventually the screen cracks, which is just this tiny little touch, but it's a super fun way to delight users. We used to also have this, I couldn't find a great animation of it, but we used to also have this animation where in our very old editor, there's Freddy like this over the top of your email. And emails should be about 600 pixels wide because of the hell of email clients. But we let users stretch that a little wider. And the wider you stretched it, Freddy's arms stretched with it, and his face got a little more sad until eventually his arms popped out of his socket and things went a little crazy. Maybe a little much, but it was super fun to build. So another example of this is our recent campaign called Did You Mean that our insane marketing team came up with. Phil earlier mentioned that we're probably known as being podcast sponsors. So sometimes we joke that when people are like, MailChimp, what's that? We're like, oh, we're a podcast sponsoring company. Because everybody knows us from that. And so 2 years ago, we sponsored the Serial podcast. And there was a young woman from, I believe, Norway who tried to read MailChimp and said, MailChimp? And it just became this phenomenon. So earlier this year, our marketing team decided to kind of have a riff on that and do a bunch of campaigns that they just threw out into the wild with things that loosely rhymed with MailChimp. And in some cases, I'm like, you need to go back to elementary school because this doesn't rhyme at all. Super cute and really cool, but it doesn't even almost rhyme at all. So one of those examples was WhaleSynth. So you can go to whalesynth.com, and a synthesizer comes up, all built with whale sounds, which sounds pretty batshit crazy, and is, but if, like me, you ever have a little bout of anxiety and you need something to calm you down, trust me, try WellSynth. It is amazing. But it's built with all just front-end HTML technologies. It's 100% just JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. That's it. Just yeah. Another one of those campaigns is MailChimp. I believe that rhymes a little more with MailChimp than WellSynth does. And again, 100% HTML, all HTML front end. What this was is an online contest for nail art. So people would go and pick which one they wanted, which one they would vote for. They'd click on it, there'd be a winner. It was a whole bracket that came down to an end. And in the end, the winner got this multi-finger ring with MailChimp on it, which is just crazy. Where else? What other platform can you do this type of thing? And your users be like, yeah, okay, right on. Another thing they did was MailShrimp. This was probably the most popular one of the group. This is actually a movie of a singing shrimp in a sandwich being eaten by a mailman in a mailroom. I was gonna play it, but I didn't really want to subject you to it. So go and look up MailShrimp. It is quite an interesting song. You would think it'd be high-pitched, but it's not. It's more like MailShrimp. I can't sing. I really shouldn't even have tried. But the great part is we're able to tie this in because of the web. So these are things that we stuck out on the web. Originally, they were not part of MailChimp. They were just web presence. They were movies that we put in YouTube ads. They were ads we stuck all over, Google and everywhere else on the web. And we built it fairly quickly. Tons of users came to it, looked at it and went, that's weird. And eventually found that, oh, it's actually MailChimp. And it went to a hi, we're MailChimp, nice to meet you campaign, where we got to talk about how we're kind of batshit crazy and we believe that being yourself makes all the difference. And so the big key there is that we were being ourselves, but we used the web to show what it's like to be ourselves. And our real goal there is just to be inspirational. We just want to inspire other people to be able to be themselves. Developers, email developers, I know there's one over here somewhere who's crazy. And without the web, that just really wouldn't be possible. And so we find that really amazing. So to sum up, MailChimp loves the web because you can listen hard and change fast. There's so many streams where you can listen. You can really change fast, super, super, super quickly. The turnaround time is just absolutely phenomenal. Remember that quantitative and qualitative data are both important. Hopefully some of my horror stories of times we only cared about one or the other will help sink in that you should care about both. We love the web because it's global. Sorry for the eagle with the laser eyes. We're hopefully working toward internationalization. If you are working on a product that has the potential to go global, please do yourself a favor and work on internationalization. Make a compilation layer in your front end that can grab text and arrange it and do things with it. Without that, you're going to be in a place where you're going like that, trying to do it. Trust me. Man, that's great. I got this microphone. I got to smash my head with it. We love the web because it creates communities. Your API will create communities. The important piece there is documentation. Make sure your documents are great. Make sure they're welcoming. Make sure they're inclusive. The web is a community full of tons of people that look like all kinds of different acts of life, ways of life, all of that. We really believe strongly in that, and we found that the web is a great place for it. We love it because mobile is there. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket. They can just go jump out on the web. They can do all kinds of stuff like go see WellSynth and calm down with some whale sounds. And it empowers us to be ourselves, which is what I just demonstrated, a bit of crazy quirkiness. And that's it. Heart from Freddy's butt in the sand.